Welcome back to our Shir in the Kutis Tziches. Today we will be learning the Tzicha on Pashas Acharei in Chelek Yud Beis. It is a Tzicha on a Rashi where the Rebbe analyzes both here and wherever it's found in Torah the term Ani Hashem, which we often find appended to or introducing various mitzvahs in the Torah. As a background to this tzicha, 2 points of information. The parsha which this posuk and the Rashi begins is Parshas Arayis, where the Eibishter tells Moshe to tell the people that there are various relationships which Hashem forbids, either adulterous or incestuous, to close family members. So all of them are under the general heading of Arayos. And the Pasuk introduces this parsha by saying that Hashem should tell the people, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, Elekechem, your God. The second point is that we find in the book of Ezra, in the last 2 chapters, it tells a story about the return of Bnei Yisrael, specifically the people of Malchus Yehuda. They returned from the Golos in Babel after 70 years of exile under the leadership of Ezra HaSofer. And Ezra tells the story of how when they got back, the leaders of the people told him that they had a problem. Many of the people had, during the time of Golus, intermarried with women from Ammon and Moav and Edom and Canaanim and so on. And they were coming back to Eretz Yisrael to start fresh with their Goyish wives and children. So Ezra made a great commotion. He davened to Hashem to help him eradicate this problem from Yidden so that they could start over again in the Eibishter's good graces. Then he called a big meeting in the middle of the winter. He got the people together and he made them promise that they would let go of their Goyish wives. They would send them back where they came from together with the Goyish children. And this was a major, major pledge on the part of the people. But Ezra impressed on them how it was destructive to even think about beginning life again as Yidden under the Eibishter's watchful, protective eye in Eretz Yisrael with a new Beis Hamikdash when they were intermarried, living with women who came from all kinds of nations and beliefs which they brought with them. It took 2 or 3 months of going through family by family, but it worked. And the Yidden overwhelmingly dismissed the wives and children, the Goyisha, so Ezra's campaign was successful. We will see in the Rashi how this story features in our discussion of Arayos. Back to the Rashi. The Pasuk says, right at the beginning of this section, Parsha Yud Ches, Vayidaber Elokim el Moshe vayomer elav ani Hashem, daber el bnei Yisrael v'omar to aleim, speak to Yidden and tell them, Ani Hashem Elekechem, I am Hashem their God. And the Eibishter continues, do not do like the practices of the land of Mitzrayim where you came from. Do not do like the practices of the land of Canaan where you're headed for. They did all kinds of depravities, but you do not do that. And then the parsha continues with a list of which relations are forbidden to Eden. Rashi brings the words Ani Hashem Elekechem from the Pasuk, And he explains, Ani hu, I am the one, said the Eibishter. So Marti Bistinai Onoichi Hashem Alekecho, who told you at Har Sinai, at Kabbalah Statoire, I said to you, I am Hashem, your God. And those were the Eibishter's opening words. And Vikibaltem Aleichem Malchuti. You accepted, said the Eibishter, my sovereignty. Me'ato kablu gzeroistai. Now accept my gzeros, my decrees. Rabbi Yoimer, Rabbi Yehuda Anosti Rabbeinu HaKodesh says, Golui v'yodu alefonov, it was revealed and opened before the Eibishter, shestoifon, that in the end of time, in the future of Yidden, stoifon linotek ba'arayis, they would be torn away from the Eibishter through arayos, through relationships that they had, illicit relationships, b'yemei Ezra, in the days of Ezra, as I described above. Therefore, because Hashem knew what would happen in the future, therefore, bo aleim bigzeir, he comes upon them with a stern warning. Ani Hashem Elekeichem. I am Hashem, your God, meaning du'umi goizer aleichem. Know who it is that is decreeing this upon you. I am a dayon lihipora. I am a judge who is trustworthy to repay, to penalize those who transgress my words. Venemon, and I'm dependable, l'shalem tzar, to repay a reward to those who listen to my commandments. That's the Rashi. What is Rashi telling us in this simple sense? That it seems strange. What is the Eibishter saying? I am Hashem, your God. Do we not know that yet, that Hashem is our God? He has to inform us. So Rashi explains that this is just an introduction to what is written afterwards, that since you have already accepted my sovereignty, then now accept my commandments and my decrees, which will be written further on in the Parsha of Arayis. That's the first interpretation. Then Rashi adds another different interpretation. How do we know that it's another one and not just flowing from the first one? Because Rashi uses the word Rabbi Oimer. Whenever we have a statement following another statement, if we want to say that the second one merely adds to the first one, you say Omar so-and-so, said so-and-so. But when you say Rabbi Oimer, that so-and-so says, it means we had the first statement, but there's an implied but here. But Rabbi said differently. What did he say? That being that Hashem knew that they would get tripped up by arayos in time to come in the future, therefore he warns them. That's the simple understanding of the Rashi, the way the Meforshim say. But the Rebbe is difficult, and the Rebbe poses 8 questions on the Rashi according to this understanding. First of all, Rashi at the beginning of O'era, where Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayidaber Elokim el Moshe, Vayomer Elov, Ani Hashem. Hashem spoke to Moshe and said, I am Hashem. So Rashi comments there that wherever we find, in many places, the term Ani Hashem or Ani Hashem Elekeichem, what it means is that Hashem is saying, I am trustworthy and faithful and dependable to reward those who listen to me, and the opposite to the opposite, to those who don't. So that way Rashi says, "V'kachu nidrash bekama mekoyim," is so it's understood in many places. So why does Rashi find it necessary to explain in our postuk what Ani Hashem Elokecha means after he's already explained it? And instead, that this is what it means elsewhere, he's already explained that at the beginning of Parashat Bo'era. So yet, Rashi explains it here. Not only does he explain it here, but he explains it in a way that's different from the way he explains it in Parashat Bo'era. Second of all, what is this difference between accepting Hashem's sovereignty and accepting his decrees? Seemingly, in Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the method of Aloha or Drasha, other methods, it's not so. But in the Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the simple sense, what does it mean to accept someone as your sovereign? That you will listen to his instructions, his commands. As Rashi himself says in the Pashas Yisroi, where Hashem introduces himself at the Aseret Hadibris, at the beginning of the Aseret Hadibris, and he says, Onoichi Hashem Elokecha, which means, as Rashi says over here, that you have accepted my sovereignty. So Rashi there says that because I took you out of Mitzrayim, Onoichi Hashem Elokecha asher hetzitzichem me'eretz Mitzrayim, because I took you out of Mitzrayim, it is right that you should be mishubodimli, that you should be subject to my laws. So the Kabbalah's Hamalchus, accepting the Eibishter's sovereignty, means accepting to listen to his laws. So what are these two things that Rashi said over here? Now that you've already accepted my sovereignty at Har Sinai, now accept my Gzeres that I'm going to tell you. On the other hand, said the Rebbe, in the third question, if there is a difference between accepting Hashem's sovereignty and accepting his laws, then this introduction, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, should have come not here at the beginning of Parshas Darayis in the middle of Chumash Vayikra, but before the Eibishter issues his first mitzvah, he should say, I am Hashem whom you accepted as your sovereign, so now accept my laws. Fourth question, what is this expression that Rashi uses, now accept Gizdeirostai, my decrees? Why not Mitzvoistai, or some other usual expression that we find all over the Chumash Rashi? Fifth question, whenever Rashi gives two comments, two interpretations of a posuk, it is because each one is insufficient by itself. There's a problem with it, and that problem is solved according to the other interpretation. And likewise, the second interpretation is problematic, but the problem with the second interpretation is solved by the first. Of the two, the first is closer to the simple meaning of the posuk, which is why it's first. Over here, what is the problem with each of the two interpretations which necessitates another interpretation? Seventh question. Concerning transgression, the usual term is avere, or to be nichshal, to stumble over a certain prohibition. Here Rashi said that it was known, it was revealed to the Eibishter that in the future the Yidden would linotek. They would be detached from Hashem in the area of arayos, in their relationships in the days of Ezra. What does the expression linotek, to be detached? Lastly, Rashi bases his comment on the Torah's Koyanim, on the Medrash Halacha of Vayikra. But there, the Torah's Koyanim cites as a support that Yidden would stumble in the area of Arayos it says that the Pasuk says when the story of the Meraglim happened, when the spies came back from Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu heard Bnei Yisrael boiche lemishpachoisav. He heard the people crying by their families. Simple meaning is families got together and they cried, each family. But what the expression boiche lemishpachoisav, crying to their families? Therefore, Rashi interprets it as they were crying about family issues, the fact that they were forbidden different relationships, in fact, as we learn in this parsha, Parshas Arayis. That the Torah's Kohenim's proof that the Yidden hankered after Arayis. Rashi doesn't bring that. Instead, Rashi brings an incident that took place 1,000 years later in the time of Ezra, and he ignores the proof that the Torah's Kohenim brings from the story that happened in Moshe Rabbeinu's own time, shortly thereafter, that the people cried about the Parshas Arayis. Why? Why ignore Arayah at hand, a proof from something at hand, and instead prove it from an incident that was going to happen 1,000 years later? So those are the 8 questions that the Rebbe raises about the Rashi. And the Rebbe explains. Going back to the question of why Rashi finds it necessary to explain the term Ani Hashem Elekeichem, although Rashi had already explained it, and not only explained it on the spot, but explained it as meaning the same thing in many other places. Rashi had already explained it at the beginning of Parshas Va'era in Chumash Shmois. So the Rebbe asked, why does Rashi find it necessary again? Says the Rebbe that what Rashi said over there, that Ani Hashem, means that Hashem is faithful to reward those who deserve reward for following Hashem's mitzvahs and to penalize those who do not. That is good when it comes after a commandment. Hashem says, here's what you should do, and he concludes, Ani Hashem, remember that I take an interest, I'm concerned with what you do, and if you do right, I will reward you, and chas v'sholom, the opposite if not. Here, it comes at the very beginning, unlike everywhere. So in what sense is it that at the very, before Hashem said the commandment, he said, Ani Hashem Elekeichem. In Parshas Va'era, it's also the beginning of a parsha. But there Hashem is, so to speak, introducing himself to Moshe. You, Moshe, were wondering about where am I? I promised Eden that I would help them, I would redeem them. Where am I? So I'm telling you, Ani Hashem, I'm faithful to keep my promise. But here, what does it mean? It's not an introduction to Eden, and it's not a reinforcement of any mitzvah, because no mitzvah has yet been said. That's why Rashi explains it, that in fact, it's a statement in itself. I am Hashem, your God, not just as an introduction to the mitzvah or as a reinforcement to a mitzvah. But I am Hashem, your God. You know that I am Hashem, your God. You've already accepted my sovereignty, right? Therefore, you shall now also accept my gzeres, my decrees. It's not an acceptance for the first time of Hashem's sovereignty. They've already accepted that at Har Sinai. But it's also not an acceptance of Hashem's commandments in general, because that's part of the meaning of accepting Hashem's sovereignty, according to Rashi, accepting that they will listen to Hashem's command. So what is it here? It's to say that now accept a new kind of command, which is called Gzeiros, my decrees. What is this decree? What kind of new type of command is this? That's the parsha of Arayis, which is different from the mitzvahs that they had before, and it begins a new class of mitzvahs called Gezeiros, as will be explained in the next section, why it is that they have to accept Gezeiros specifically. At Har Sinai, they accepted to do Hashem's mitzvahs, but that doesn't yet mean that they would do the kind of mitzvahs called Gezeiros, because that they don't expect. Now that Hashem is about to issue Gezeiros, they should know that they can't say, no, we didn't buy into it for Gezeiros. Once you accept Hashem as your sovereign, you are bound to keep all of his laws, including those which are called Gezeiros, like Parshas Arayos. So the Eibishter never needed to give this reintroduction Ani Hashem Elokeichem before, because that was part of their accepting Hashem's sovereignty that they accepted at Har Sinai. Specifically here, when we're beginning with Parshas Arayos, which is the new kind of mitzvah called Gzeiros, here Hashem finds it necessary to say Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Now, why is Arayos a special class of mitzvahs called Gezeiros? So the Rabbi introduces, generally speaking, when it comes to relationships between husband and wife, Ashidach, one looks for yiches, one looks for lineage. And we find this again and again, that Avram Avinu instructed Eliezer, go to my family in Aram Naharayim and find a wife for Yitzchak from my family, so that I know what her lineage is. Likewise, when it comes to the marriage of, when it comes to introducing Nachshon ben Aminodov, the Pasuk says that Nachshon ben Aminodov was the brother of Elisheva bas Aminodov, who was Arna Kohen's wife. It tells us, whom did Arna Kohen marry? Elisheva, daughter of Aminodov, who was the brother of Nachshon. And from there we learn that when marrying a woman, one should check her family, her brothers specifically. So the importance of lineage is impressed on us again and again in the Chumash until here. So it would seem that it's most logical dafka to marry someone related. And the closer the relationship, the better. Both because the lineage is clear and established, and even more so because the purpose of marriage is v'hoyu lebos orecha, that husband and wife should be joined as one flesh in their children, and that they should give birth and rear children, and that should work much better if the parents would be related to each other and closer to each other. Yet, the Parsha of Arayos tells us exactly the opposite. That which are the relationships which are forbidden? Those where the man and the woman are dafke closest. That's one strange thing about Arayos. A second thing, how did the world get going? How did humanity get started? Hashem created together with Cain and together with Hevel. He created twin sisters, and they married them. Likewise, Yaakov Avinu married two sisters, which would be forbidden in the Pasha of Arayas, and it was specifically Yaakov of all the Ovois who was considered most perfect. All of his children were righteous, unlike Avraham Avinu, who had a son Yishmael, unlike Yitzchak Avinu, who had a son Esav. Yaakov Avinu is mitosa shleimo, his bed was perfect, all his descendants were righteous, none of them broke away from him. So whose children were they? The children of two sisters that Yaakov Avinu married. So it works. Likewise, Amram, Moshe Rabbeinu's father, whom did he marry? His aunt, Yocheved. And who was born of that union? Moshe Rabbeinu, Arna Kohen, Miriam Anavia. What wonderful progeny. So it's not only strange, but it's paradoxical. And a person could say, and the Rebbe brings the parallel of saying this from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu says, after the story with the Akedah, he says, Ribono shel Olam, I don't get it. First you tell me that I'll have a son Yitzchok, and he will grow to be a great nation. Then you tell me to take that son who's supposed to be the father of the nation, and no one is born to him yet, and I should slaughter him, offer him as a korban. So what happened to that nation? I didn't say anything. Then you tell me, no, don't slaughter Yitzchak. Don't raise a hand against him at all. So which is it? And in a very similar vein, a Yid could say, Ribono shel Olam, first you tell me that the way humanity gets going is by marrying sisters, and the way tzaddikim are born is by their parents marrying each other, even though they're closely related. And now you're saying, no, if it's a close relation, you mustn't marry. So where do we stand? That's why this whole class of mitzvahs are called gezeiros, decrees. They go against the intuitive logic of people who look at themselves and at history, and they don't understand why is the Eibishter saying these instructions. That's what the Eibishter says. Ani Hashem Elekeichem. You've accepted me as your God. Now accept to follow not just mitzvahs, but even those mitzvahs which are gezeiros, they're decrees which you don't understand or they seem to you paradoxical. That is the first interpretation of Rashi, why over here Hashem says, Ani Hashem Elekeichem. But Rashi doesn't suffice with that interpretation because it has a problem. It's true that here we begin with a new kind of mitzvahs which are gzeiros. So they had to accept to follow those gzeiros, those decrees. But it would seem that when they accepted Hashem's sovereignty in general, as soon as he starts instructing them with mitzvahs, he should say, now that you've accepted my sovereignty, which means to follow my laws, that extends to all the laws I'm going to give you, including some which you will not understand at all. Why wait till Pashas Acharei and the introduction to Pasha of Arayos to say this, Ani Hashem Elekeichem, you must accept my gzeiros? That's one problem with the first interpretation. Second of all, it's not like this idea of not marrying relatives is so new to them. Already, Bnei Noach, children of Noach, way back before Avraham Avinu, they were already forbidden certain relations, at least those which were very close, marrying sisters, mothers, daughters. That was already forbidden before Matan Torah. And although they were not forbidden to marry two sisters, and they were not forbidden to marry an aunt, so what Yaakov Avinu did in his time was okay, marrying two sisters. What Amram did in his time, marrying his aunt, was okay at the time. True, but the basic idea of Arayis was already there. So it's not so surprising. And the Yidden had said at Matan Torah that all that Hashem would tell us, said, so they understood that it's going to include the prohibitions of Arayis. So it's problematic to say that Hashem finds it necessary now to introduce the ideas of Arayis with a special declaration, except my decrees. Because of these two difficulties, why did Hashem wait till now? He could have said that statement that you must accept all my mitzvahs as soon as the Eibishter gave the first mitzvah. And second of all, they were already introduced to this idea of Arayis long before Matan Torah. And at Matan Torah they said, so we'll do whatever Hashem says. So they understood that they're going to have to keep the prohibitions of Arayis. Because of both these difficulties, Rashi does not suffice with the first interpretation. He brings the second one, that in fact the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem serve the same purpose, they fulfill the same functions as the word Ani Hashem or Ani Hashem Elokeichem, which is usually said at the end of a mitzvah, to reinforce the mitzvah, to know that Hashem is the God who will reward you when you follow his mitzvahs, and chas v'sholom the opposite. It fulfills the same function. So why does Rashi have to say it over here? Why is it said over here before the mitzvah? So Rashi brings from the Torah's Kohanim, but he deviates from the language of the Torah's Kohanim in order to highlight that the prohibitions of Arayis are different from all others because it involves tearing a person away from Hashem. What is it about Arayis that tears the person away from Hashem more than any other prohibition, kashrus and Shabbos, etc.? Says the Rebbe, this is what we find as one area of Pashas Arayos, which will be explicated later, not right here in detail in this Pasha of Arayos, but it will be stated later that there's one area in Arayos which tears a person away from Klal Yisrael altogether. What is that? If a Yid marries Rachmana litzlan, a woman who is forbidden to him, a relation, or if he has an adulterous relationship with a married woman, the resulting child is a Yid. He has a blemish. He's called a mamzer. But he's a full-fledged Yid like any other Yid. But if a Yid marries a woman from some other nation, the child born of that union is a goy. And in that way, the lineage of the father stops altogether. That line, which goes back to Avraham Avinu, has come to an abrupt end. And the Yid is torn away completely from the Eibishter. In fact, he's taking the seed of Yisrael and he's putting it in a foreign place where it has nothing to do with the Eibishter anymore. That is unique to the prohibition of Arayos. It doesn't exist with other prohibitions at all. This linotek, to be detached from the Eibishter, that true specifically of Arayos, or the one area of Arayos. Now that's why the people cry. The Rashi doesn't bring that the people cried about arayos as a support for the fact that they were hankering after arayos. Instead, he brings the story of Ezra. And before the Rebbe said, why not bring arayah from something close at hand that happened then instead of arayah from 1,000 years later? Now we understand why. The story of Ezra concerned Yidden who had married Goyish women. They had intermarried. And that is linotek. That is detaching themselves. And that was the whole commotion that Ezra made, that you're detaching yourself from the Eibishter. Just as he's ready to bring you back to be his people in your land. But when they cried about mishpochos, lemishpochos, to their families, family prohibitions, that was about the prohibitions which would not result in a complete detachment from the Eibishter. It would result, Rachmana litzlan, in a blemished child, but not in nituk, in detachment. So since Rashi is stressing that the gravity of this Parshas Arayos, is that it contains an element of detachment which no other Aveda does, so he doesn't prove it from the Postuk that Moshe Rabbeinu heard the people crying about their family prohibitions. He proves it from the Postuk in Ezra. And the Rebbe adds that although here in our Parsha they were not instructed about not intermarrying, but since this is the Parsha which starts the list of prohibitions in relationships, so and part of that prohibition is that a person can be completely detached. Therefore, in introducing this parsha, the Eibishter said, Ani Hashem Elekechem, to add to the gravity of this prohibition, so they should know who it is decreeing this, that it's Hashem Elekechem, Hashem who will reward you if you follow his ways, and who will penalize you if you fail to follow in his ways, despite the fact that these are difficult to keep to, and people have a tendency to violate them. So why doesn't Rashi suffice with this second interpretation of Rabbi? Because it too is difficult in another way. In Pshute Shel Mikra, in the simple sense of the Posuk, to say that Hashem adds a special clause, Ani Hashem Elekechem, here, because he knows that in 1,000 years from now, it's likely that something will take place, and he sees it already as taking place, and therefore the Eibishter wants to forestall it by saying Ani Hashem Elekechem is shver, that in Pshute Shel Mikra that is referring to something 1,000 years later. Therefore, Rashi brings the other interpretation, that this is an introduction to Gezeros, and in fact he brings this as his first Pirush, meaning this is closer to Pshute Shel Mikra than the second Pirush, that is because of the story of Ezra, that Hashem is saying this is a very grave prohibition, Ani Hashem Elekechem. But in order to remove some of the sting of the difficulty that the Torah is referring to an incident 1,000 years hence, Rashi alludes to an answer without saying it explicitly, but he alludes to it by saying that, you know who said this interpretation? Rabbi. What is it about saying that it was Rabbi Yehuda Hanosti, who said this interpretation? What is it about saying that would better help us understand that why Hashem is talking about an incident in 1,000 years in the future? Who is Rabbi Yehuda Hanosti? What was extra special about him. He was a Tana among other Tanoim. Yes, he was a prince from the house of David. But what is he most renowned for? When you say Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, what it immediately calls to mind is that he was the one who organized and recorded the Mishnah. Until his days, the Mishnah was oral, taught from teacher to student. Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, was the one who recorded it, and that was a very big deal. Why was it a big deal? Because according to the original Torah law, the oral law was not meant to be recorded. It was meant to be transmitted from teacher to student orally and not recorded. But that chain of transmission in the days of Rabbeinu HaKodesh was in danger of being broken. There came a time when there was a concern that maybe the oral law will chas v'sholom be lost because they were unable to keep up the chain of transmission. So Rabbeinu HaKodesh saw that it's necessary in order to preserve Torah to record it. And that's what he did, despite the original Torah prohibition against recording it. So where did he get authorization to do that? His authorization came from a pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Kuf Yud, chapter 119. There it says in the letter Ayin, Eis Lasois LaHashem, it's the time to act for Hashem's sake. Heiferu Teirosecha, they are disturbing or destroying your Torah. So simply it means it's the time to act for Hashem when those who want to interfere with Torah, they want to act against it, so we must stand up for it. But the Mishnah in Mestachta Broches and the Gemara there explains more fully that it's a time to overturn the Torah, for us to overturn the Torah, to overturn that prohibition against recording Torah Shabbal Peh, the oral law. We should overturn it. Why? As a time to act for Hashem's sake, because it looks like Torah Shabbal Peh would be lost. In other words, this pasuk in Tehillim by David HaMelech, which was said also about 1,000 years before Rabbeinu HaKodesh, that pasuk in Tehillim refers to the time of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, and it gives a license for him to record the Mishnah. If that's what that pasuk means, so according to Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKodesh, it makes sense to say that the meaning of a pasuk will be understood on the basis of an event many, many years later, 1,000 years later, and that's why this pasuk, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, can be understood according to Rabbi as alluding to an event which would happen in the days of Ezra that Hashem wants to forestall. So let's look back at the Rashi now in light of what the Rebbe taught us and see how we understand Rashi differently. The Rashi brings two interpretations. The one that I am Hashem, your God, whose sovereignty you accepted upon yourself as Sinai, now accept my Gzeiris. How do we read the pasuk according to this interpretation of Rashi? Rashi is saying, the pasuk is saying, I am Hashem, your God. It's known from the time of Sinai that you've accepted my sovereignty, which means, according to Rashi, that you've accepted to do my mitzvahs. But now I'm going to instruct you in gezeiros, in mitzvahs which are surprising and paradoxical to you. That's why I'm making the statement, a statement in itself, not just to reinforce the mitzvah of arayis, like other cases of Ani Hashem or Ani Hashem Lekechem, reinforce a specific mitzvah. It's a statement in itself, I am Hashem your God, which you've already accepted. Now we're going to apply that to the mitzvah of arayis, which are a specific class of mitzvahs called gzeiros. According to the second interpretation, Rabbi, the word Ani Hashem Lekechem served the same function as they usually do all over Torah. They reinforce a mitzvah which Hashem gives, but normally they are said at the end of a mitzvah. I'm instructing you, says Hashem, in this mitzvah, and make sure that you keep it, because I am Hashem who is reliable to reward you or to punish you. Over here, that statement is said at the beginning as an extra phrase, impressing upon them the gravity of the mitzvahs of arayis, the prohibitions of arayis. And why does Hashem want to impress upon them the gravity? Because he knows that they have a shvachkeit, a weakness for arayis. As we will see 1,000 years hence, that they will fall into the trap of a kind of arayos which tears them away from the Eibishter altogether. And that's what's so grave about the prohibitions of arayos, that it tears them away in that their children will no longer be Jewish at all. And that's why the Eibishter reinforces this mitzvah at the very beginning. And the Rebbe puts this into the words of Rashi, because Hashem knows that they have a weakness, bo aleim bigzeira. He comes to them at the outset with a stern warning. He doesn't leave it for the end of the mitzvah. He tells them, what I'm going to tell you now is especially grave, so remember to do it, because I, Hashem, am reliable to punish those who disobey and to reward those who obey.